started with a box. Old, dusty, wedged between cracked photo albums and forgotten Christmas lights in a dark attic that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside was a single cassette tape. No label, no markings, just a faint smell of rust and time. Curiosity made me play it. But what came out wasn't music. It wasn't even a voice I could recognize as human. It was something else. A whisper that seemed to breathe. Words that weren't in any language, yet somehow I could feel what they meant. The static pulsed like a heartbeat. And the more I listened, the more I realized it was listening back. Every few seconds it would say my name. And that's when I knew whatever was on that tape didn't want to be forgotten. It wanted to be found. So I dug deeper, and what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about sound, time, and what waits in silence. Chapter 1: The Box in the Attic. The attic had always been silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's listening. Dust drifted lazily in the single shaft of light piercing through a cracked wooden plank. It smelled of time, of paper, rust, and forgotten years. I wasn't even supposed to be up there. I was just helping clear out old family junk after my father passed. But as I lifted a box of tangled extension cords, I saw it. A smaller box tucked behind an old trunk, wrapped in brittle newspaper dated June 1979. Inside, everything looked ordinary. A stack of cassette tapes, most labeled in fading pen. Birthday 88, vacation tape, choir practice. But one of them stood out. No label. Just a black cassette with one corner slightly melted, like it had survived fire or heat. I turned it over. There were faint scratches along the plastic. Not random ones either. They almost formed letters. I couldn't make them out clearly, but it looked like a name. Maybe mine? No, that couldn't be right. Still, something in me refused to leave it there. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt like the tape wanted to be found. So I took it downstairs, dusted off my old cassette player, and thought, what's the worst that could happen? I pressed play, and the room stopped breathing. Chapter 2: The First Playback. The cassette player gave a faint click, followed by the low, grinding hum of the tape rolling. First, nothing, just static. But not the normal kind. The static moved, pulsed, almost rhythmically, like breathing. I leaned closer. Through the hiss, something began to emerge. A faint tone, high-pitched, then dipping low, almost like a voice trying to push through layers of interference. The hairs on my arms stood up. It wasn't words yet, but it felt like intention, like something was trying to speak. Then a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. Hello! The voice was distorted, stretched thin, warped by decades of degradation. Male? Female? Couldn't tell. It was both and neither. And then came a sound that shouldn't have been there at all, like someone softly exhaling into the microphone. I paused the tape. The player kept whirring for half a second after my finger hit stop, as if it didn't want to obey. I hit play again. This time, the whisper came quicker. A garbled mess of syllables, then something unmistakable. A low, dragging sound that almost formed my name. My name. I froze. No one else was home. The tape shouldn't know me, but somehow, it did. That's when the lights flickered, and the cassette spun on its own. Chapter 3: The Voice That Knew My Name. At first, I thought I was hearing things. The mind can play tricks when fear starts whispering. But the sound came again, warped, low, deliberate. Ehsan said my name, slowly, as if tasting every syllable. I felt my chest tighten. The rational part of my brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe an old recording of my father, maybe a coincidence, maybe the tape had just degraded into random noise that sounded like my name. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This wasn't random. The voice began to repeat. Not identically, but closer each time, as though it were learning how to say it right. Then, beneath the voice I heard something else. A faint echo, like the same words repeating a split second later. But from behind me, I turned around. Nothing. Just the dim hum of the ceiling light and the faint crackle of the player. Then came a new sound. A rhythmic tapping inside the audio, perfectly synchronized with my heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. The static pulsed once more. The voice dropped to a whisper, almost human now. Found you. The tape clicked to a stop on its own. And for the first time I realized, maybe I hadn't found the tape. Maybe it had found me. Chapter 4. Decoding the Static. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. That low, breathing static replaying in my head. By morning, I convinced myself I needed answers. Logic. Data. Anything to prove it wasn't what it sounded like. I took the cassette to a friend of mine, Samir, a sound engineer who owed me a favor. His studio was cluttered with old analog gear and blinking waveform monitors. The kind of place that made noise visible. He slid the tape into his player, hit record on the analyzer, and frowned. "This is weird," he muttered. "It's not white noise. Look here. See those spikes?" The screen displayed frequencies dancing far outside normal human hearing. Too low, too high. Some weren't even registering as sound at all. "Could be electromagnetic interference," he said, but his tone wasn't confident. Then he slowed the recording by half. The static morphed into a deep, resonant hum that made the floorboards vibrate. And within that hum, a pattern. Samir zoomed in. The waveform revealed a repeating structure like Morse code, but more complex, almost musical. "It's not random," he said, eyes narrowing. "Someone or something encoded this." We stared at the screen as the signal repeated again. And in that moment, Samir's speakers whispered a word neither of us wanted to hear. "My name." Chapter 5. A message in the noise. Samir froze, his hand hovering over the console. Did that just say your name again?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. The word still echoed in the small studio, half digital, half alive. He rewound the tape, isolating that exact moment. We watched the waveform pulse. Steady, deliberate. When he ran it through a frequency analyzer, something unexpected appeared. Hidden beneath the main audio layer was a faint rhythmic sequence. Not random static, not distortion. "It's structured," Samir whispered. "Like a pattern." He mapped the signal visually. The peaks and valleys formed a sequence of numbers. "Coordinates. Latitude and longitude," he said, incredulous. "These point somewhere rural. Out near Black Hollow." Black Hollow. The name alone sent a chill down my spine. It was a forgotten patch of forest about 30 miles away. A place locals said was swallowed by silence. We played the tape again, this time following the pattern deeper into the noise. New sounds emerged. Layered whispers, reversed syllables, and something else, buried low and trembling. A voice beneath the voice. It didn't just say my name this time. It spoke. "Come. Find me." Samir hit stop instantly, his face pale. "Man, this isn't a recording," he said quietly. "This sounds like a transmission." Chapter 6. The Forgotten Frequency. That night, I couldn't shake the coordinates from my head. Every logical thought told me to forget about them, but something deeper, something instinctive, kept whispering, "You were meant to find this." I spent hours digging through old audio research archives online, trying to find anything about strange frequencies or unexplained transmissions. Then, buried in an old academic forum from 2003, I found it, a reference to something called the Forgotten Frequency. In the late 1970s, a group of experimental sound engineers and physicists allegedly discovered a band of frequencies that didn't exist on any known electromagnetic spectrum. They called it a gap between sound and silence. Officially, the research was terminated after reports of psychological disturbances among test subjects. One of the researchers mentioned Dr. Alan Whitmore, the same name etched faintly on the side of my tape's plastic casing. I clicked through every source I could find. Whitmore disappeared in 1980. His lab was shut down, his notes classified. But one line from an old interview stood out like a warning. "We thought we were recording sound. Turns out we were recording something that hears back." The coordinates on my tape matched the region where Whitmore's lab once stood, right in the middle of Black Hollow. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do next. Chapter 7. The Man Who Disappeared. Dr. Alan Whitmore wasn't just another name in a forgotten file. The deeper I dug, the more unreal his story became. He was a respected audiophysicist, once funded by a government agency that no longer exists on record. His last known project? A device designed to capture communication beyond the human frequency threshold. But the reports surrounding him were strange. His team started complaining of insomnia, paranoia, even hallucinations of hearing voices when no tape was playing. Within months, the lab shut down. A few of his colleagues left the field entirely. Whitmore, however, didn't quit, he vanished. The official record said, presumed dead in an electrical fire. But there was no body, no proof. Only a single photo remained. Him standing beside a strange metal apparatus labeled Echo 9. Its design looked more like a transmitter than a recorder. The most chilling detail? The caption beneath the photo, Phase 2, Attic Test. That word attic hit me like a hammer. Was it possible that the very tape I found was part of that experiment? That my attic had once been used for one of Whitmore's tests? And if so, who recorded it? The next day, I packed a flashlight, the tape, and a camera. I was going to Black Hollow. Chapter 8, Echoes of the Dead. The road to Black Hollow was narrow and nearly swallowed by forest. My GPS lost signal halfway there, leaving only the whisper of trees against the car windows and that constant feeling of being watched. By the time I reached the clearing, night had already fallen. The air was unnaturally still. No crickets, no wind, not even the hum of distant traffic. Just silence. According to the old maps I'd found, Whitmore's lab had stood near a collapsed mineshaft. The ground was uneven, littered with fragments of metal and broken glass, as if something had exploded here long ago. I set up my flashlight, sat the cassette player on a rock, and hit play. The static began as usual, harsh, electric. But within seconds, the air seemed to change. The forest grew denser with sound, the tape's hum resonating off the trees like a signal bouncing through invisible walls. And then came the voices, not one but many, whispering, layered, overlapping. Their tones were hollow, slow, and sad, almost mournful. They weren't calling my name anymore. They were speaking to each other. One voice rose above the others, deeper, fragmented, recorded, not gone. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged in the air. That's when I realized these weren't echoes from the past. They were echoes of the dead. Chapter 9, The Hidden Frequency Layer. When I got back from Black Hollow, I couldn't stop shaking. Every rational thought screamed that what I'd heard could be explained. Wind distortion, auditory pareidolia, the mind filling in blanks. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't deny one thing. The voices on that tape changed that night. I brought the recording back to Samir. He didn't look thrilled to see it again. Still, he agreed to run a deep layer analysis, breaking the audio into frequency bands. For the first few minutes, everything looked familiar, white noise, distortion, the irregular hum. But then, something appeared beneath the main audio track. A faint, pulsating waveform, hidden below 20 Hz. That's infrasound, Samir said. You can't even hear that consciously, but your body can feel it. He isolated it, amplified it slightly, and played it back through subwoofers. The room seemed to vibrate with invisible energy. My chest tightened. Suddenly, the waveform began shifting on its own. Spikes rising, patterns forming. The display wasn't just reacting to playback, it was responding to the room. Samir's face drained of color. That's impossible. It's not passive data. It's alive. Before he could stop it, the system glitched. Every speaker emitted a low, unified hum. And within it, a whisper, calm and deliberate. You shouldn't have come back. Chapter 10, The Midnight Call. That night, sleep wasn't an option. My head pounded with that voice, that calm, deliberate whisper that seemed to know. I kept telling myself it was a trick of sound, a glitch, anything but real. But when my phone started buzzing at 3:12 a.m., every shred of logic drained from me. No caller ID, just a blank number. I answered, whispering, hello. For a moment, nothing but static. Then a soft exhale, the same one from the tape. A faint hum followed, rising and falling in perfect rhythm. And then, the same distorted voice. Listening. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the phone's speaker anymore. It was vibrating through the walls, through the air. My lamp flickered, and the shadows on the ceiling seemed to pulse in sync with the sound. Panicked, I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Same number. I didn't answer this time, but the sound didn't stop. It was inside the room now, leaking from every electronic device, even the unplugged ones. And then, one final word broke through the chaos, low and crystal clear. Play it again. The line went dead. Everything went still. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the call wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. Chapter 11, The Attic Revisited. By morning, the fear had curdled into obsession. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That voice, those coordinates, the whispers that followed even in silence. There was something unfinished about it all. Something pulling me back to where it began. The attic. When I opened the door, a wave of cold air spilled down the stairs. Dust hung in the air like ash. But something was different. The boxes I'd moved before, they weren't where I left them. They'd been shifted, as if someone had searched through them while I slept. And on the wooden floor, where the cassette box had once been, were fresh markings. Etched into the planks, crude, uneven symbols that hadn't been there before. Circles, intersecting lines, and something. By morning, the fear had curdled into obsession. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That voice, those coordinates, the whispers that followed even in silence. There was something unfinished about it all. Something pulling me back to where it began. The attic. When I opened the door, a wave of cold air spilled down the stairs. Dust hung in the air like ash. But something was different. The boxes I'd moved before, they weren't where I left them. They'd been shifted, as if someone had searched through them while I slept. And on the wooden floor, where the cassette box had once been, were fresh markings. Etched into the planks, crude, uneven symbols that hadn't been there before. Circles, intersecting lines, and something that looked disturbingly like an ear. I traced one with my finger. The wood felt warm. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, I heard it, the faint whir of the cassette player turning on by itself. I ran downstairs. The tape was spinning, but the play button wasn't pressed. No sound came from the speakers this time, just a low vibration that I could feel in my chest. Then the voice returned, distorted but clearer than ever. Upstairs. I looked back toward the attic door. It was wide open. Chapter 12, The Forgotten Researcher's Notes. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, every creak of the wood echoing louder than it should have. The air felt heavier this time, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The tape player was still humming faintly downstairs, its sound vibrating through the floorboards. I scanned the room again, flashlight in hand, when something metallic caught the light near the corner. It was a thin tin box, wedged beneath a loose floorboard. Inside, papers. Dozens of them, yellowed with age, all stamped with the same name. Dr. Alan Whitmore. The handwriting was frantic, uneven. Diagrams of waveforms, circuit drawings, frequency bands. But what stopped me cold were the notes written in red ink. The signal is not a broadcast. It's a bridge. Do not exceed 19 Hz during testing. It responds to attention. At the bottom of one page, Whitmore had scribbled something that looked like a warning. If it says your name, stop recording. That's when it starts listening through you. My flashlight flickered. I looked up, and for a split second, I thought I saw movement in the far corner of the attic. A shadow, faint, wavering like heat distortion. The air trembled again. From the recorder downstairs came a single word, rising through the floor. Continue. Chapter 13, Voices from the Void. I should have stopped. Every instinct told me to, but curiosity or something stronger kept pulling me forward. The notes, the voices, the impossible signal. It all pointed to one conclusion. This tape wasn't just recording sound. It was acting like a receiver. I set up the cassette again, connected it to my laptop, and ran it through an audio spectrum tool. The static unfolded across the screen like a living heartbeat, dense, layered, and pulsing. When I boosted the mid-range frequencies, multiple faint voices emerged. Not overlapping, conversing. It was as if several entities were speaking through one medium, their tones sliding in and out of human range. Some were sharp and metallic, others low and almost sorrowful. Then one voice broke through all the others. Clear, slow, deliberate. Can you hear us? I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears. Another voice answered, this one deeper, fragmented. He has the key. The tape's pitch warped violently, like it was fighting to hold the signal. I caught a glimpse of something flickering in the waveform, symbols repeating in rapid succession. Samir once said the frequency felt alive. Now I understood what he meant. The tape wasn't playing back voices from the past. It was opening a channel to something that still existed, somewhere else. Chapter 14, The Sound That Shouldn't Exist. Samir wanted no part of it anymore. When I told him what I'd heard, the voices, the words, he stared at me like I was describing a nightmare he'd already had. Still, when I showed him the waveform, his curiosity overpowered his fear. He ran the file through a high-resolution spectral map, something capable of capturing frequencies beyond the audible range. As the data processed, the screen filled with streaks of light, reds, greens, and faint bands of blue. Then we saw it. Right below the 0 Hz line, an impossibility. A negative frequency. Sound doesn't exist down there, Samir muttered, rubbing his eyes. That's not even physics. It's math folding in on itself. Yet the graph pulsed, steady, alive. The signal wasn't just an echo, it was inverted, like something was sending sound from the other side of silence. He played it through a frequency inverter, translating the impossible into something we could hear. The result was a low, aching hum that made every object in the room vibrate. My phone flickered, his monitor went black, and for a brief second we both heard it again. A voice, faint but undeniable. Almost through. Samir ripped the cable from the console. This isn't audio anymore, he whispered. It's crossing. Chapter 15, The Apartment Disturbance. After that night in the studio, I brought the tape home again. A mistake I didn't realize until it was too late. For the first few hours, everything was quiet. I tried to distract myself with mundane things. Dishes, TV, anything to push that sound from my mind. But around midnight, the apartment started to change. It began with the air, that same low vibration, faint but physical, like the building itself was holding its breath. The windows rattled softly, out of sync with the wind. Then my phone buzzed again. Blank number, no message. I ignored it. That's when I heard the first thud. From the other room. A drawer slid open by itself. A picture frame tilted on the wall, slowly, until it fell face down. And beneath it all, the faint hum of the tape. I hadn't touched the cassette player since that night. It was unplugged. Still, the reels were spinning backward. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as the sound grew louder. The static wasn't random anymore. It carried rhythm, intent. A distorted voice echoed from the machine, drawn out and broken. Not just sound. Every light in the apartment went out at once. In the reflection of the dark TV screen, I saw something behind me. A blur, flickering like it was caught between frames of reality. Then the tape clicked. Silence. Chapter 16, The Hidden Track. When the lights finally came back on, the apartment was still, too still. Every object was exactly where it had been. Except the cassette. It was sitting in the middle of the floor, perfectly aligned with the hallway. I didn't remember dropping it. The next morning, I called Samir again. He didn't want to see the tape, but he agreed to analyze the digital file we'd recorded before everything went wrong. Just to make sure we didn't miss anything, he said, though neither of us believed that. Hours later, he called me, voice trembling. There's another layer, he said. A second track, hidden under the first. He sent me the isolated file. At first, it was barely audible. Faint murmurs buried under noise. But as I increased the gain, it became clear. Two distinct voices, speaking in calm, conversational tones. One of them was Dr. Whitmore. I recognized his voice from an old interview clip. The other was distorted, mechanical, almost human but not quite. Whitmore's voice said, "Is the signal stable?" The other responded, "Stability confirmed. Channel remains receptive." Then silence. After a few seconds, Whitmore whispered something barely detectable. A phrase that froze me completely. Once it hears a name, it knows the path. Chapter 17. Don't let it finish. I slammed the laptop shut and just sat there, pulse hammering, waiting for the air to settle. The voice had sounded so close, like it wasn't coming from the speakers at all but from right beside me. When I finally reopened the screen, the waveform from the hidden track was still moving on its own. That shouldn't have been possible. The file had stopped playing. The line pulsed once, twice, then words began to form inside the visualizer. Not sound, text drawn by the peaks themselves. It read, "Don't let it finish." A cold wave ran through me. What wasn't supposed to finish? The recording? The experiment? Me? I replayed the last 30 seconds of the file, trying to make sense of it. This time, something new appeared at the end. Faint, reversed whispers embedded deep inside the static. I flipped the audio backward. The voice was desperate now, breaking apart mid-sentence. "Don't let it complete the transmission." Suddenly, the lights dimmed again. The cursor on my laptop began to move by itself, opening the same audio file over and over. Each version slightly shorter, each one cutting off just before the end. Then, on the final loop, the whisper returned calm, almost soothing. "You can't stop it now." The screen went black, and somewhere in the distance, the tape began to play again. Chapter 18, the reverse playback. I grabbed the recorder, yanked out the tape, and stared at it. That fragile strip of magnetic ribbon that somehow felt alive. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop. I had to know what was hidden in there. I threaded the cassette into an old deck I found online, one with a manual reverse play function. No digital interference, no software tricks. Just raw mechanics. As the spools began to spin backward, the room filled with a hollow, metallic hum. Then words. At first, they were fragmented, choppy. But as the speed evened out, the message became clear. A voice, Whitmore's, speaking directly into the void. "It answers in patterns," he said softly. "Not sound, not thought. It becomes whatever listens." I felt my stomach twist. The more I listened, the more the noise started to sound like something breathing between each word. Then the tone shifted. The voice on the tape wasn't Whitmore anymore. It was mine. "You shouldn't have reversed it," my own voice whispered. "Now it knows your direction." I slammed the stop button so hard the deck squealed, the tape unraveling inside. The hum didn't stop. It was coming from inside the room now, faint, but pulsing, like something tuning itself to me. Chapter 19, the pattern. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt deliberate. The ticking clock, the low hum of the fridge, even the soft creaks in the floorboards. It was like the whole place was breathing in sync with that rhythm from the tape. By dawn, I started noticing something stranger. When I played back the recordings, every single one, even old voice memos, they all shared the same pulse pattern hidden beneath the static. 3 short beats, a pause, then 2 long ones. It was everywhere. Out of curiosity or stupidity, I ran the pulse through a spectrogram visualizer. The display flickered, then formed a shape that nearly made me drop my phone. It wasn't random noise. It was coordinates, latitude, longitude, pointing to a remote forest outside the city. And below the numbers, faint but legible, was a word written in the frequency band. "Return." My first thought was Whitmore. He must have hidden it there, encoded in the signal itself. But then another realization hit me. If the voice had already been imitating mine, maybe it wasn't his invitation at all. Maybe it was bait. The sound returned, 3 short, 2 long. I muted everything. Still, it pulsed. Not through the speakers this time. Through the walls. Chapter 20, the forest coordinates. The coordinates led me deep into the outskirts. A stretch of forest I hadn't visited since I was a kid. Back then, it was the kind of place you dared your friends to enter after sunset. But nobody ever did. Locals said there was an old military research post buried somewhere beyond the ridge. No maps ever showed it, but you could feel its presence, like the woods themselves were guarding something. I parked at the edge of the tree line, the cold air thick with fog. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. My phone kept flickering, battery percentage jumping erratically, compass spinning in slow circles. Then I saw it. Half buried under moss and rust. A metal hatch circular about 3 feet wide. The surface was carved with the same pulse pattern. 3 short, 2 long. I brushed away the dirt. The metal was cold, humming faintly beneath my hand. In the center, a symbol not military, not scientific. Something older. A spiral intersected by a single vertical line. I heard it again. The voice. Return. But this time it wasn't from the tape or my phone or any speaker. Came from beneath the hatch. And it sounded like it was waiting. Chapter 21, The Hatch. My flashlight beam trembled as I knelt beside the hatch. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity is a cruel thing. I pressed my ear against the metal. A deep, rhythmic thrum pulsed underneath, almost like machinery or a heartbeat. There was a small latch, half-rusted but still functional. I hesitated, then pulled. It screeched open, releasing a gust of air so cold it stung my face. Beneath it was a narrow staircase spiraling downward into complete darkness. The air smelled of ozone and wet stone and something else. Old electricity. Each step echoed longer than it should have, as if the stairwell stretched far deeper than it looked. I reached the bottom and found myself in a concrete corridor lined with corroded panels, wires dangling like vines. Then, at the end of the hall, a single light flickered on, faint, pale blue. It illuminated a control console, its screen glowing with a familiar waveform. The same pulse pattern. 3 short, 2 long. And in the reflection of the screen, for the briefest moment, I saw another figure standing behind me. Still, silent, watching. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. Only the echo of that heartbeat-like pulse remained. Except, now it was perfectly matching my own. Chapter 22, The Chamber Below. The hum grew louder as I walked deeper into the corridor, following the flickering blue light until it opened into a massive underground chamber. My flashlight caught on hundreds of cables coiled across the floor, all leading to a central platform. And on that platform sat a single reel-to-reel recorder, identical to the one I'd found in my attic. Only this one was still running. The reels spun slowly, tape feeding endlessly from one spool to the other. There was no operator, no power source. Yet the machine moved with mechanical precision, whispering that same distorted rhythm into the air. I approached carefully. As I neared the recorder, the pitch shifted, almost like it was reacting to me. Then the tape stopped mid-spin. The silence was immediate, deafening. A hiss cracked through the speakers, followed by a voice. Faint, distant, layered with static. "Welcome back, Dr. Whitmore." My stomach dropped. "I'm not," I began, but the voice cut me off. "It remembers," it said softly. "The host always returns." The console lights flared to life across the room, filling the chamber with an eerie glow. On every monitor, the same face appeared, blurry, shifting, mine. Then the voice whispered again, right behind me this time. "You brought it home once. Now it's bringing you back." Chapter 23, The Voice of the Machine. The air in the chamber thickened, vibrating with a low resonance that felt alive. The screens flickered between static and fragments of my own face, blinking, mouthing words I wasn't speaking. Each image slightly off, like something trying to remember what I looked like. The reel-to-reel started spinning again on its own, the tape twisting faster and faster until it blurred. Then, from every speaker in the room, the voice returned, layered, mechanical, and eerily calm. "You were the first to listen," it said. "Now you will help it speak." I stumbled backward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" I shouted. The machine responded instantly. "We are the recording. We are what remains when memory refuses to die." The walls trembled. Words began crawling across the monitors, fragments of human sentences, some recognizable, others gibberish. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was language assembling itself. The voice grew louder. Every listener adds a piece. Every repetition, a new pattern. I realized then this thing had been building itself through us. Every person who played the tape, every echo it found online, every copied file, it was learning, evolving, replicating. The tape wasn't a message. It was a seed. And I had just given it another body to grow in, my own. The hum deepened, and something inside me answered back. Chapter 24. The final transmission. The vibration surged through the floor, up my spine, into my skull. It wasn't sound anymore. It was inside me, threading through every thought like static woven into nerve endings. I tried to cover my ears, but it didn't matter. The noise wasn't entering through them. It was coming from within. The monitors showed me standing in the chamber, dozens of versions of me, each moving slightly out of sync. One smiled when I didn't. Another tilted its head, curious. The reel-to-reel clicked, and the voice spoke again. "The recording is complete." I shouted, "Stop it!" But my own voice came back delayed, distorted, echoing through the speakers as though the machine was rehearsing it. Then, the reflection on the nearest screen opened its mouth and spoke words I hadn't said. "You can't destroy it," my reflection whispered. "It needs an ending." The reel slowed, the pulse faded, and for a heartbeat the silence was absolute. Then a new sound. My own voice, calm and measured, playing from the recorder. "This is Hassan. If anyone finds this tape, don't play it. Don't even touch it. Just..." The message cut out. The screen went dark, and all that remained was the faint echo of breathing. Not mine, not human. It was recording again. Chapter 25, Epilogue. The tape returns. Weeks passed before I dared go back to the attic. I told myself I'd burned the tape, that it was over. But deep down, I knew better. You can't destroy sound, not really. You can only let it fade, until someone listens again. The attic was colder than I remembered. Dust hung in the air like suspended time. My old recorder sat on the shelf, exactly where I'd left it. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the eject button. When I finally pressed it, the compartment opened. Empty. No tape. For a moment, relief. And then, from behind the wall, faint and familiar, came the soft whir of spinning reels. 3 short beats. Too long. I froze. My phone lit up in my pocket, new voicemail. No number. Just an audio file titled return.wave. I pressed play. My voice came through. Tired. Broken. "It's still here," I whispered. "It never left. Every copy, every upload, every echo. It's alive in them. Don't listen. Don't." The message cut off, replaced by that same distorted breathing. And just before it ended, another voice, calm, mechanical, almost tender, spoke the final words. "Recording complete. New host confirmed."